Hello, welcome to our Bible study. We are an Easter people. Today, we're going to talk about how Easter heals us. Because of course we know that at the resurrection, sin and evil and death were defeated. But it doesn't feel like it exactly. Because we know that happens. We know we will participate in the resurrection when Jesus returns, right, at the end of time, at the day of the Lord. But there's still sin, death, pain, scary stuff right now. And so how is Easter healing us now, right? And one thing that we need to realize is that one of the most common phrases in the Bible is do not be afraid. God or divine being saying, do not be afraid, appears over 100 times in the Old Testament and over 40 times in the New Testament. So why is God telling us to be afraid when there's so many things to be afraid of, right? We're afraid of becoming ill, of our loved ones becoming ill, of dying, of our families dying, of pain, of taxes, of financial collapse, of spiders. I mean, the list goes on, right? There's tons and tons of things to be afraid of. But yet, God keeps assuring us, right? Keeps reminding us, do not be afraid. And even Jesus, when he lived in this world, knowing he was going to go to this horrible death, kept telling everyone, do not be afraid. So exactly why are we not to be afraid? Or even better, how are we not to be afraid, right? Why? Okay, we know at the end of time we're going to be resurrected, peace, justice, and love will rule the world, but what about this moment? And one of the stories that I've read in the Bible, one that I think is so beautiful, it's one of Jesus's healing stories, and it's one that I think demonstrates Jesus's healing power and why we should listen to Jesus telling us and God telling us, do not be afraid, is this one. It appears in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 5. It begins right at the beginning of chapter 5, and it's the story of the healing of the Gerasene demoniac. And this shows how, when you kind of unpack and look very closely at the story, you see how God heals us from all the things that are scary in the world right now. Because after Jesus heals this man, doesn't mean this man's never going to have a problem in his life, doesn't mean this man isn't going to ultimately die one day. But all the things he needed to be afraid of were gone. So the story starts off, Jesus and his disciples have crossed the Sea of Galilee and come to the land of the Gerasenes. And everything that was east of the Sea of Galilee and the River Jordan were Gentile territories. Everything up and down were all Gentile territories. And all that territory is hostile to Jewish people, right? The Gentiles and the Jews were very hostile to each other. Their belief systems were different. They resented kind of each other, especially because they both kind of thought each other were heretics and going to damnation of some sort or weirdies. I mean, they had all sorts of reasons to dislike each other. And yet Jesus voluntarily steps onto what to Jews is unclean land. And he immediately steps onto this land and is immediately confronted with hostility with a man possessed of a demon. And this man is not only a hostile demon-possessed man, but he's possessed of the fiercest demon Jesus ever encounters in his lifetime. Now, we in our modern times just kind of look back and say, oh, well, you know, they said he was possessed by a demon, but obviously this man was mentally ill. And at the end of the day, we don't need to get into it here nor there. Yes, we do know, while terribly rare, demonic possession does exist, and we don't need to look at this man's symptoms and try to tear it apart. That part doesn't matter. We'll go with the language of the Bible, and we can still learn from the story whether or not this guy really was possessed by a demon. Because certainly we have to realize that we are both physical beings and spiritual beings. And so there is always a spiritual dimension to anything that physically happens to us, right? I mean, something happy happens to us and we feel the joy of God in us, right? It's a joyous spiritual event that has happened to us as well as whatever joyous physical event, whether a terrible headache has gone away, or whether, you know, we meet the love of our life, or we get a big promotion, or something wonderful like that, or we have a baby, or someone in our lives that we love has a baby, we have a grandchild, a nephew, a niece, whatever. But when something terrible happens, there's a spiritual dimension to that as well, right? People can become depressed, or oppressed, or all kinds of things. And we even talk about people having their demons, even figuratively. So we're just going to remain with that language, and you can take it however you wish to. So this man who comes up to Jesus with a demon has been suffering terribly. He lives among the tombs. And literally, this man lives in a cemetery. And in the time of Jesus, for Jewish people, and in many parts of Judaism today, dead bodies and cemeteries are some of the most unclean areas ever. If you encounter a dead body or go to a cemetery, you have to ritually cleanse yourself with a special ritual, purifying ritual, to purify yourself and cleanse yourself again. And this guy lives there. And even today, we would think somebody who loves to hang around cemeteries or thinks they're a real cool place, we would kind of look at them like, okay. And some of us might even think that someone who works as an undertaker, well, it's a very necessary profession. We might think that that's a little creepy of a profession. I know one of my sisters, there was a young guy when she was in college, super nice, super intelligent, treating her very well, nice looking kid, happened to be in a family, and their family business was undertaking. You know, they were the local mortuary people, and she just found that too creepy, and she broke up with him. And, you know, some people, that just really doesn't sit well with them, and my sister was one of those people. So all those things around cemeteries already are kind of give a lot of people pause. And here's some guy living amongst the tombs. But a lot of people live amongst the tombs, even today, while not literally living in a cemetery. You have people who are self-destructive. Now you have the people who are literally self-destructive, right? You have people who cut themselves out of anxiety or depression or whatever psychiatric or psychological issue they have. You have people who have suicidal tendencies, suicidal ideation, suicide attempts, even people who have addiction issues. I mean, that's very direct self-harm that people do, right? That's living in the tombs because they are literally physically harming themselves, often really trying to kill themselves. But then you have people who live in tombs, amongst the tombs, in other self-destructive ways. People can be self-destructive by overspending, by not taking care of themselves, not listening to their doctor's orders, not taking necessary medication, not smoking, not all kinds of things that we don't immediately think of as self-harm. But they are, because they are, people who work themselves to death, who are just always working, always going, always having something to do, and never doing any self-care, ever. Never relaxing, never trying to relax, never going and getting help in those kinds of ways to take care of themselves. And then you have people who sabotage good things that happen in their lives. And that is a way of living among the tombs. My husband and I went to college with a young woman, super smart young woman, super nice young woman, attractive young woman, and every good thing in her life she sabotaged. She got a good job, and they really liked her there, and they were ready to promote her, so she just stopped going. She got a really good internship, and they really liked her, and it would have helped her in a future career. She quit it. She had a boyfriend, really nice guy, treated her really well, started to get serious. She started cheating on him and made sure he caught them. Then she started dating the guy that she was the new boyfriend, same thing. He started getting serious. She started cheating on him, made sure he caught her. Everything in her life she just destroyed. That was anything good in her life, she destroyed. Over and over. She lived in the tombs. So there are all kinds of ways people live in the tombs. Then he was naked. And there are all kinds of ways, and being naked, in the first century, only slaves were naked. The Jews actually put clothes on their slaves because they were very modest, and nudity was just very offensive, public nudity. But again, their clothes would have been very identifiable that someone was a slave. But in the Greco-Roman world, and now they were in Gentile territory, they were in the Greco-Roman world, slaves were naked because animals were naked. So if someone was a slave, they didn't wear any clothes to show this is not a human being. This is an animal. This is a beast. And this beast we can make do anything. So this man now is living among the beasts, living like a beast. He has become dehumanized by his demon. And we can think of all the ways people are dehumanized in our world, right? We have the dehumanization of mental illness, of homelessness, of incarceration, of immigration status, of racism, of gender issues, we can just go on and on of all the ways people not only stratify, but then dehumanize the other, right? It's why in wartime, people come up with slurs against the enemy, because then I'm not killing a human being, right? I'm killing this such and such, because they're not a real person, and I can kill that. It's a such and such. All these things that dehumanize, and that happened to this man. And so this man who lives among the tombs, lives among the dead, self-harms, and is dehumanized. Oh, and also other people have tried to help him. By restraining him in chains, they were trying to keep him from self-harm, right? They were trying to restrain him, keep clothes on him, keep him from self-harm, and they couldn't. He kept breaking the chains. And how many times have we seen people, maybe it's even us, who have resisted other people trying to help us when we needed help for something? Even if it was just a mild correction. I know I hate criticism. Oh, I'm perfect. Don't tell me. I don't want to know. How dare. But yet, this man, people were trying to help him. I mean, obviously they must leave food for him. That's how he stayed alive. But people had been trying to help him, and he broke the chains of their trying to help him. And yet, this demon inside this man knew exactly who Jesus was. Because the sonship, the divine sonship of Jesus, is recognized by all the beings of the spiritual world. And his demon, being of the spiritual world, knew exactly who he was and was afraid because he knew Jesus had the authority to cast him out of this man. So he runs forth immediately to Jesus and bows down on his face and says, Jesus, Son of God, Son of the Most High God, I beg you. It says adjure in most of our translations, which is just a horrible word. Sometimes translators drive me nuts because it can have, I command you, or I beg with you. And of course, it's I beg of you. Obviously, no demon is going to command Jesus Christ to do anything. I beg of you, do not torment me. And Jesus asks his name. Now, in ancient times, in the ancient Near East, it always meant to know someone's name meant you had power over them. And now we would realize knowing someone's name doesn't necessarily mean we have power over them, but it does open the door to a relationship. And in this case, the demon giving Jesus his name will open a door to a relationship, but of course it's the authority relationship here. And the demon does obey because the demon has to obey Jesus. And he tells him, and to me, even as a little kid hearing this name, it chilled me because I knew what it meant. He says, my name is Legion, for we are many. And a Roman legion consists of between 4,000 and 6,000 men. So we can only imagine how many torments afflict this poor man. Not to mention, when you think it evokes Rome, right? A legion is a Roman group of soldiers. I always wondered, what did Rome do that brought to this man that brought him to that state? What oppression, what torture, what ghastly event. What did Roman soldiers, Roman injustice, what did Rome do to him that brought him there? And then Legion begs Jesus not to cast them out and have them wander the earth, but rather asks to be sent into a group of pigs. Jesus actually is being merciful, which is an interesting thing. Jesus being merciful to a demon. But Jesus does. The pigs run off a cliff and drown in the sea. Now, we might say, oh, the poor little piggies, they weren't doing anyone any harm. But you got to look at it from a first century point of view. Pigs were looked at by humans only two ways. Either they were unclean, vile, nasty animals who should be roasted and cleansed and purified, or they were food. That was it. They weren't these nice, cute little animals that you could pet and were smart and you could train and, have in your house because they were clean and cute and would greet you. No. They were either nasty, icky, bleh, or they were food, or they were dinner. They were ending up on your plate. They were ham. Okay, they were nasty or they were ham. That's it. No personality, no brain, no possible sense, understanding, mind, personality, no. Ick or ham. That's all they were looking at. So we cannot think of it in sympathy for the pigs. We might, but the story is not trying to give us sympathy for the pigs. So please, it would be like they ran into a group of trees that ran over the hill and fell over the hill, and the logs floated or sank to the sea. Rocks did. We got to look at them as rocks. Okay, so we got to have to set the pigs aside here and look at it from a symbolic point of view, which is that Jesus sent the demons home. The sea in Israelite imagery is the home. It's chaotic, it's frightening, it's the home of the sea dragon, and the sea dragon is another name for Satan, for the enemy. It's his home, it's where the demons live. So he just sent them back home to leave people alone and stay there forever. They weren't going to get out of the sea, mind you. It wasn't like, oh, now they're free to go possess other people. He just sent them home, said, go home, stay home, leave humans on earth alone. And he cleansed the Gentile area. Now it didn't have impure pigs. That was the big sign of impurity. So Jesus cleansed the man, healed the man, cleansed the land, and got demons out of the way to never bother people again. So the townspeople come in because they've heard, right, the swineherds have come and run off and told them, and they come back, and what do they see? A completely healed man, sitting calmly, fully dressed, in his right mind. And they're amazed, but they're terrified. They're terrified of this powerful Jewish man from a God they don't understand and have barely heard of, in a sense, only kind of by rumor and innuendo and rude people who've come to town. And they don't know what to do, so they ask Jesus to leave. And the man, the healed man, now just wants to go back to Judea and be a disciple. But Jesus has an even better plan. He asks the man, or tells the man, to instead go and tell his family and friends what happened and what good things God has done for him. But the man does even better than that. That man goes and spreads the good news of what God has done for him throughout the Decapolis. And everyone who hears, oh, and by the way, the Decapolis is a series of 10 and sometimes up to 19 cities that were in all that land east of the Sea of Galilee and the Jordan River, all the way from Damascus to the city at the time was called Philadelphia, but it's now Amman, Jordan. So we're talking a vast territory that this man personally proclaimed the good news of Jesus, that do not be afraid. Do not be afraid of pain, of suffering, of demons, because Jesus heals you from all of that and keeps you safe and sends them away forever so that there's nothing to be afraid of anymore. And instead, you just have love that conquers all those barriers of self-doubt, those barriers of self-hate, those barriers of self-destruction and the barriers between peoples, right? Because this is a Jewish man doing it for a Gentile man. In the end, at the end of the day, this man is telling the Jewish God, a Jewish man came and did this for me for no reason. He just showed up one day and did this. This is God. This God is everyone's God, and he does it for everyone. And all the people who hear him are amazed. And in the Bible, when it says people are amazed, that means their hearts and their minds are open and in joy, and they are ready to be disciples. This man has become an evangelist, and he has created disciples. This is how the resurrection heals us. Because in this way, in this symbolic way, well, in reality this happened, but we can see this, Jesus has led this man out of the tomb. And in the same way as Jesus came forth from his own tomb, Jesus leads us from our tombs right now, just as he will on the last day when he leads us forth from our final tomb of death, of physical death, into the permanent resurrection. Alleluia. Thank you.